All right, race fans, we are live to discuss one of the most iconic races in all of motorsports, the Monaco Grand Prix, one of three events that make up the motorsports Triple Crown, in addition to the 24 Hours Le Mans and the Indy 500, which is also this weekend. Before we get into it, just a few exciting updates for those of you in the United States that are users of some of our paid entry games. In the last week or so, we have made a ton of updates and added a lot of new features for our Pick'em games. We added 100 multipliers all the way up to 100x, so you can get 100 times your money by picking a lineup of 8 better or worse picks or driver matchups. We had one winner hit in the first weekend with $5, made $500. So congrats to whoever that was. We added, 5 new sports to pick him as well. So in addition to Formula One and NASCAR, we also have NASCAR Xfinity Series, NASCAR Truck Series, MotoGP, Formula E, and IndyCar. All of them will be live this weekend. So it will be a very busy weekend over at GridRival. So if those are motorsports series you follow, go check them out in our Pick'em game. We also added Flex Picks, which gives you the ability to win your Pick'em lineup, even if you get one, or if it's over 7 picks, even if you get 2 of them wrong, you will still be able to get a payout. And then the last thing you may have seen, we added an instant pick feature to your league. So we know that a lot of players do a lot of research already on the lineups they have in their season-long fantasy leagues. And so now at the bottom of your My Team lineup screen, you have a button where you can instantly add that lineup to a Pick'em ticket and select, better or worse based off whatever lines we have for that driver at the moment. And then lastly, in our daily fantasy game, we added private contests. So you can now actually create your own contest on your own terms with up to, I believe, 12 players. And you can invite your league members, invite your friends, and make it completely your own experience. So back to the topic at hand, the Canadian GP. Before we get into it, a few quick intros. I'm Ross, co-founder and CEO of GridRival. With me, I have Michael Ursinoli, our CTO, William Laddie, our principal software engineer, and Ryan Booth, director of business operations. Quick reminder to subscribe to the show if you are liking these and you are a frequent user. Go to our YouTube page and click that subscribe button. We also have the next event already planned and up live for the Canadian Grand Prix. So if you go to that event, on the right side, you actually see save. So you can save it and it'll send you a reminder, I think. A couple other things too. We do have a Discord community. It looks like Michael already posted that in the chat, so that's pinned to the top. And if you are a hardcore Discord user, or you've really enjoyed being part of that community, we are looking for moderators. If that's something you'd be interested in, feel free to reach out to us. And the other thing we're constantly looking for, we have a small team of writers that produce all the content you see if you happen to go to gridrival.com. So if you love writing and you love motorsports and you love GridRival and you want to contribute somehow in that way, please reach out. So on to the topic at hand. I already see there's some questions rolling in. So just a reminder, this is a Q&A live session. So send us anything, and we like to kind of be interrupted and answer questions live in real time. So feel free to answer or ask any questions about your lineup or about the race this weekend. Quick recap of Imola winners and losers. I think as I was going through the list of winners this week and losers, I didn't save our recommendations last week, but I feel like a lot of them we were pretty head on. I think we all talked about Piastri being underpriced. I think after a week or two, I think the previous race he had dropped $2 million. So of course, he was a great buy for anyone that put him on his team. He's up $2 million. Hamilton had a great race, up 1.5, and the always gamble Lance Stroll could have went one way or the other. He had one of those weeks where he did well for everybody. Might be a sign to maybe not have him at Monaco, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But he went up $2 million. One of the only one of 2 drivers, along with Piastri, that went up the maximum amount over the weekend. Kevin Magnussen up 1.6 million. 1.6 Magnusons. And then Danny Rick had a good race as well. Modest gain, but up $1 million. And then losers, again, a recommendation, pretty sure we made last show is, we all kind of said Sergio Perez is probably maybe not necessarily overpriced, but certainly unlikely to go up. And in fact, he did drop. I forgot to write down the value, but I think he dropped. Did he drop 2 million?
2 million.
Yeah, $2 million. And then we have Alonso, unfortunate a race down 2 million. As a result, even though Lance Stroll did okay, I'd put the Aston Martin kind of as the losing team as a constructor as well. They dropped a decent amount. And then Albon, who crushed me personally over the last 5 races, he dropped my entire team value by I think $4.5 or $5 million. That was a downward spiral that I had to enjoy the ride on. So he dropped another $2 million, down to 9.1 million. So a wild weekend. Any commentary you guys have or want to add on Imola before we kind of get into this weekend's event? Any questions coming in yet?
We got some questions, but one fun fact. Before lockdown hit for Imola, the GridRival Employees League had a 0% adoption rate on Alonso and Perez and a 100% adoption rate on Piastri. So we all took our own advice in our lineups.
Yeah.
Red Bull's looking beatable. That's my big takeaway from Imola. Like
yeah,
Red Bull
very
seems
true.
beatable now.
My big. Oh, go ahead, William.
And depending on how these upgrades go, like we could see Verstappen actually get beat on pace. And towards the back of the grid, we do see a couple of teams that seem to be in free fall. Williams, in particular, Aston Martin, not looking so hot either these days. We'll see if they turn around at Monaco or if this is going to be a continued decline for them.
My big takeaway is that personally, my team is back. We were scuffling for a while, over 1,000 points, up to 3rd place in the league. Gained $8 million in value. So I hope everybody listened to my picks. I hope they all ignored my picks earlier in the season, but I hope everyone's listening now. And like I said, I put my lineup in. I was like, I'm not even going to care about practice. I'm not changing anything. Didn't make any changes. Best lineup of the year by far. So I'll be doing the same thing again this week. I already have my lineup locked in. I don't need Monaco practice. I'm feeling confident about where I'm at.
Yeah, up 8 million in one event is something else. That's not something you see very often. My
practice is for nerds.
Yeah. My personal league I'm in, not our company league, everybody except one person last week was down in value, all red. This week, everybody except one person was up. So it was quite the swing around. I personally haven't made it back to, I think I was up to 123 in value. Now I'm down to 114, but I did regain after last week. So we got some questions coming in. Let's see. Let's go to the top here. How do we feel about Alex Albon after his value beatdown? I was thinking about the same thing, and I'm at the disadvantage of I just have too many races in my mind. I cannot remember what has led to his decline at every single event for the past 4 or 5 events, but I know that it's been a pretty steady drop. If you look at his salary chart on his driver profile, it looks like, ever since, was that Australia, he went slightly up between Japan and China and has dropped almost $2 million. He went from 14.4 to 12.4, 12.8 to 11.1 to 9.1. So like you guys might have this more on the top of your mind than I do, but has that been purely pace, right? How much of that has been bad luck, or is he just like, for one reason or another, starting to struggle?
Ever since he stole Sargent's car, it's been a huge issue for him. So I think that has something to do with it. It's the karma in the universe type of deal. Because Sargent's still showing pace, looking very good, and Albon is just a dumpster fire.
Yeah. I don't think he has the pace to score points on a regular basis anymore. I don't think Williams has kept up with the upgrades the other teams have brought. I think Alpine's leapfrogged them already. I would put Aston ahead of them. I'd put Racing Bulls or V-Carb, whatever, ahead of them. Like, I think they're probably about 8th or 9th best. Probably ahead of Sauber and probably ahead of Haas. But I think that's the ceiling for Williams. And yeah, maybe it's because, most of their cars have salvage titles now. Might be that. Might be that. Imola was bad luck for Albon. When the team doesn't get all 4 wheels on the car, going to be hard to do well. But yeah, I do think this is a decline for Williams, and unless there's some miraculous upgrades that come around soon, I am inclined to avoid them if I'm trying to build value.
Yeah, the second half of his question was can James Voles, I believe, right the ship? And um, my guess would probably be not this season. I think we've seen how it's turning a Formula One team around is not something that you do in one season. I think a great example of that is Zach Brown, at McLaren. It's taken them half a decade, and they've had ups and downs, and so I hope that he gets the opportunity to stick around to do it. But if I was betting money, I don't think I'd bet on him turning much around there by the end of this season. And thus, as it relates to this conversation, specifically in terms of Albon, I think it sounds like across the board, not only maybe he not be at his bottom, but it might not be a ton of upside like there was last season, which was great for him.
Yeah, and everyone on the call, you're going to hear us when we talk about Monaco. We're going to be talking a lot about qualifying pace. And Albon has never gotten out of Q2 so far this season. He hasn't been qualifying well. So although his sudden and steady price decrease, especially 2 million, is probably looking attractive for potential upside. Yeah, I think he's being more accurately reflected in price than he really is a value at this point. You could gamble on it and hope he comes out ahead of Sauber and maybe someone else has an issue again, an Alpine, a Haas, something, and he comes out ahead. But if you're looking at downright pace, I'm not bullish on Albon right now, even at his price.
Yeah. So a lot of questions started to come in about Monaco. I think we just kind of jump into lineups, overvalued drivers, undervalued drivers. I have, if you remember from last week, I had only a couple spots dropping off, 3 spots actually that I have to fill. And I am stuck. I'm probably going to pull a Ryan this week and wait until I see what goes on in practice, but I'm stuck between kind of a decision to grab Alonso, because I think Alonso's probably a value right now at a drop of 2 million, maybe not a ton. I don't think he's going to go up like $5 million or something. And so my decision is Alonso and a midfielder, or Perez maybe, and a back marker, because I think Perez could be, I wouldn't say like really undervalued. But in 4th place, I think he's 27.2. And so that's the decision I'm stuck with, and I haven't landed on it yet. And then for the first time, we're actually going to talk about, we know that there's several folks in here who play our daily fantasy game, which is essentially very, very similar to our leagues game, except you're only playing for a weekend. You're playing with cash on the line. And because there's no contracts, right? Because you're only changing for one event, salaries reset every weekend, budget. So you only have 100 instead of, where in your league you can accrue money. So strategically speaking, it's very, very different. So we were going to each kind of go over some of our fantasy lineup ideas that we had, or daily fantasy lineup ideas. So my strategy, and probably to some degree will roll over in my league strategy, but it's just league game is such a longer term play. I really, for Monaco, built my team around experience, just because this track has a lot of walls. And there's certain drivers who that doesn't necessarily favor. So I really tried to build my lineup around people who have been at this race a lot, people who've been successful at it. You might disagree with some of my picks, but here they are. So I just started at the top with Verstappen, obvious easy pick. Hamilton, lots of experience at Monaco. Alonso, lots of experience at Monaco. On the lower side, I picked Ricardo. For whatever reason, he historically loves this event. He's always qualified there really well. I don't remember what's happened, last season, but I just like that 1 year, or there's really 2 years where he just completely dominated when he was on the Red Bull team, stood out to my mind when I was like quickly going through this. The one that might be maybe, more debatable amongst the team are my last 2. So I picked Bottas as kind of like my back marker, just because been there, done that a long time. He's fairly consistent. And then for my constructor, what I was trying to do is find a constructor that didn't have coverage on any of the drivers I had. So I picked Haas because those two drivers, K-Mag can get a little bit wild sometime, but Hulkenberg and K-Mag both have taken a lot of laps around the Monaco GP. So mine is purely structured around experience and who I think won't wreck in qualifying and hopefully won't wreck in the race and just kind of make it to the finish line. I think oftentimes Monaco can also have a very high attrition rate. So that's kind of where I land for strategy this weekend. I'll pass it off to Michael.
Yeah. So I'm looking similarly at experience. I'm also looking at weather. Last year, Monaco rained, caused a little bit of chaos. So looking ahead at the weather report to see if there's any potential for precipitation to turn things up. On my lineup, I still have. Well, sorry, are we doing DFS lineups or leagues lineups?
Both.
Both. All right. So on the league side of the fence, because I feel a little bit stronger about that. I still have Verstappen on contract. I still have Piastri on contract, Sonoda on contract, and Ocon on contract. Ocon didn't work out as well for me as I thought it would last week. He's down 0.5 million, but I think that there's some upside on the Alpines. Both from an experience play. Ocon has a lot of experience at Monaco. Gasly is a former Monaco winner, right, William? 2020?
No, he won Monza in 2020.
Monza in 2020.
So
Sorry, I got my M's mixed up there. But so for me, I'm actually I only have one spot open. So I've got about 10, 11 million that I'm looking to fill for a spot, which Gasly fits right into. But I'm not really feeling like running a double Alpine team. But I am feeling good about the rest. On the constructor side of the fence is where I can make a change. Currently have McLaren. Have made a little bit of money. They can still go up in value. They're definitely going to generate good, solid points. So probably going to stick with it. But if I feel like I need to shift around drivers, I think my change is going to be more so looking at my constructor than the rest of my team. I saw some questions about like Yuki as talent driver. Yes, I mean I have 3 talent driver eligible drivers, and right now my star is next to Yuki. I think Hulk is also a good option because of the A, experience, and B, his qualifying pace, and also it's kind of hard to pass him with his level of experience and his level of defense. And then on the DFS side of the fence, it's going to look largely similar, just no Verstappen. Save that money and go for someone a little bit cheaper to generate those points, likely a Ferrari, likely Sainz.
Who are you passing off to?
William.
All right. I heard about half of your lineup. My Wi-Fi ate the other half. Hopefully it doesn't eat my lineup. Last week we saw Red Bull struggle in practice, and then I took some big swings at my fantasy team, actually. I had Verstappen, I had Red Bull, and I dumped both of them. And I was half right there. Red Bull was a good dump. I went for McLaren instead. Verstappen ended up winning the race. He got the toe from Hulk, so he gets pole that he might not have otherwise gotten, and he just barely hung on to beat Lando to the line. So Verstappen's an option for me on the league side. If I decide to bring it back, like I'd have to make some other changes to do that. I was torn between Sonoda, Hulkenberg, talent driver last week. I went Hulkenberg because I thought Magnussen was going to screw up again and get Hulk some teammate points. That didn't happen. Mag had a clean race. Mag didn't get a race ban, which I saw somebody ask about that in the chat. If he gets a ban, whoever sits in the car instead, he's going to get the points just like he were Magnussen. Might not be a big thing if it's Ollie Behrman, though. So we'll see if it ever comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
He looked okay on Friday running that Haas car. But yeah, so I had taken the swings there. And on the DFS side, I did actually win our private DFS contest last week. Like
nice.
We had those private contests we plugged. We use them too to play amongst ourselves. And so last week I had Sonoda, Hamilton, Leclerc, Sargent, Stroll, and my snapshot cuts off my constructor. I think it was probably McLaren, if I had to guess. No, I think I went cheaper. And there's not enough. Whoever the constructor is, it was. I forget. I have McLaren on the league side.
Mercedes.
Mercedes. I had Mercedes. That sounds right.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I only have one screen on my phone, so to have three things open at once, I just take photos sometimes. The DFS lineup that I slapped together 5 minutes before we went on air for Monaco, right now it's Piastri, Magnussen, Tsunoda, talent driver, Hulkenberg, Gasly, McLaren. I may play with that. I may go for one of those cheaper drivers like a Bottas or a Sargent, and then aim a little bit higher on the driver's side. I may swap McLaren for Mercedes, which would free up 5 million. So if I did this lineup again, it would probably be something like a someone in like the Sainz neighborhood of value instead of McLaren, and probably Hulkenberg would free up the rest of that money. So that's just my current thinking, and a lot can change. I thought that Red Bull and Verstappen were locks until we saw practice last week, and we saw they were beatable.
Mhm.
And we'll see how things shake out. If they continue struggling at Monaco, maybe we're a little bit cooler on Red Bull, or maybe they're looking dominant. So that's why you got to look at practice. You got to be a nerd sometimes and look at some practice. Hey, I'm paid to be a nerd, though. So of course I'm going to look at the data.
There's actually
so those are my thoughts.
Okay, sorry. Good.
Yeah, so those are my thoughts right now.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one thing to mention is when William was talking about his DFS lineup, Ross had mentioned that. So we have $100 million budget with the current driver salaries in the league's game. So with a $100 million budget, William won our private contest between the group of us and generated 931 points. That's a lot of points to $100 million. I came in second with 925. Ryan came in third with 924. So with a $100 million budget, three out of the four of us here were able to get into the 900 points range.
Which, by the way, my league team, which had like another 12 million in budget before release fees, it only generated 933 points.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, you don't need to be all that top heavy. You don't need to have all that bank balance to really find some efficiency with your lineup.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Ryan, wanted to make that point. You go ahead. You also won our league this week, right?
Oh yeah, I could sit here all day and talk about Imola results and how our league went. But yeah, we're on a heater right now. The first time not changing anything after practice was my most successful week. So I guess I didn't overthink it. I got Verstappen. He's got one race left. I'm not going to drop him. Going to keep him going. I like him to qualify first at Monaco and win the race. As we all talked about, Piastri, he's on my team for 4 more races. I think pretty much everyone added him as they should have. I still think he has room to grow. I would not be cutting him. Keep him going. My lineup's actually pretty similar to Ross's after hearing what he had said. I also went for Alonso. I mean, he's got experience here. He just took a $2 million drop. I do think that Aston will bring a little more pace here. I think last race was just a disaster for Fernando. I don't see that happening again. I've got Ricardo. I think he's shown some Monaco success. He's cheap. I'll be running him as my talent driver as well. And then the person that nobody wants, the person that I've already ripped on this show, I'll be running Albon. I just have a good feeling about it. I don't think it's that great of a decision, but we're just going to go with it. Like, everything's been working out for me lately, so everything I touch turns to gold, and we're just going to hope that continues. And then I'm still running McLaren as my constructor. Again, Lando's awesome. Piastri I'm high on, so I have no plans of cutting McLaren anytime soon. And then DFS, I'm kind of going with if you're not first, you're last strategy on this one. Go big or go home. I got Max and Piastri just because I can't quit those guys. And then nobody wants Stroll at Monaco. I'll be running Stroll as my talent driver. I think this is the year he finally breaks through at Monaco.
Breaks through a barrier?
Maybe. I don't know. If he comes in last, so be it. But I don't think anyone's running him as talent driver. I want to come in first. I don't care if I come in third or fourth or whatever it is in the league. It's first or last for me. So Stroll talent driver. We'll see how that works out. And then I'm running Ricardo and Albon, and VCarb is my constructor. So that's one of those lineups that I think will either put me on the top or maybe finish last place, but I'm okay with that. I would not ever run that lineup in leagues.
Yeah, Albon is the reason that Williams has run up such a damage bill this year. And I think if you set a line on 1.5 times in the wall for Albon this week, you could take the over. I think I see Albon hitting the wall. That's a brave choice.
I mean, the line for Williams cars into the wall this week is probably 3.5.
Getting back to just more in general, there's definitely some questions about drivers, undervalued, overvalued. Where do we think Perez sits at this point in terms of a league pick? He's at 27.2. He's ranked fourth. He dropped 2 million. Average 8 race points of 160. Where'd you guys put him? Think he's a deal?
He's not consistent enough.
Yeah.
That's his
I agree.
problem. Like, I think he could even fall a little bit further. I just don't think he's consistent enough.
Okay.
And he's only getting teammate points if Max has a problem, which is the other issue.
Yep.
Yeah, and in most lineups, you're only going to be able to have one driver north of 25 million at this point of the season. So if you're looking at one driver north of 25 million, I would say Perez is my last pick right now. And I would be stretching to get Norris, stretching to get a Verstappen, or taking a gamble on, not really a gamble, but trying to save some money and go for Sainz, and hope he pulls out ahead of Perez and Leclerc, just for a points to value ratio.
And what about Alonso? So down 2 million, best of the rest at this point, ranked 9th behind, both Mercedes, both Ferraris, both Red Bulls, both McLarens. 19.6 million average points, 8 race, higher than Hamilton.
Well, if Alonso has a crash, he's talent driver eligible. That's if he DNFs or has a crash, he's talent driver eligible. So there's a little bit of risk there signing him right now. I would say I do have a lineup. I do have a lineup that I'm very bullish on that does have Alonso on a 2-race contract to try and get some fast value of him coming back and ranking well. So if within 2 races you could take out 1 to 2 million in profit, that's a pretty good use of 19.6 million in my book. But it is a little bit of a gamble, and also if he unfortunately does DNF, you're going to see a massive shift on the app of people picking him up to be a talent driver. And then if you don't have him or you already lost money on him, that's going to be a rough situation.
I think at this point, Tsunoda's faster than him. Hulkenberg might be faster than him. I think his upside is at Monaco is his teammate hitting the wall.
Yeah.
Which would give Alonso a number of extra points.
Let's see others. We had Albon. Questions about Albon. I think we kind of already talked on him. I'm thinking about. Let's look at. So I think we also agree Piastri has upside. Hamilton went up 1.5. I feel like Hamilton's upside to me seems limited.
There's a question about Alpine. How do we feel Alpine's going to perform at Monaco? I have Alpine drivers in my lineups. I think that Alpine as a constructor, a little unsure of. A single Alpine driver, whether a Gasly or an Ocon, could be a good move for Monaco. They both have the experience for the track. It all comes down to their qualifying pace, which I am a little bit more bullish on Ocon for the 2.7 million than I am Gasly if I'm betting on qualifying pace and specifically Monaco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is the first week I've been staying away from Alpines, and I think the first few races it was a pretty easy stay away because they were just overvalued. I think they're finally now coming into that range where I would feel comfortable putting one in my line. I don't have one this week, but I did strongly consider it, and this is probably the first week of the year where I would say if you've got Alpine or Ocon or Gasly, you're probably okay. Versus I would have called you an idiot a couple weeks ago.
Some specific questions. I have 2 drivers, and this is from Vivian Nightingale. I have 2 drivers and a team to pick this week with 45 million. I have Max, Oscar, and Nico already, thinking Racing Bulls, Alonso, and Ricardo. Any better options for me Racing Bulls, Alonso, Ricardo with 45 million left. I have not had any Racing Bulls is definitely went up in value this season. I'm just looking at their salary chart here. They're actually kind of all over the place. So they've had the last 2 races, they've went up quite a bit. They're almost highest they've been. So something to consider in terms of salary. They have 124 points in 8 race average, 110, which is the highest, higher than Alpine, which is right below them. I don't know how you guys feel about Racing Bulls. I like Alonso and Ricardo. I mean, I already talked about why I like those 2 for Monaco. It kind of just depends on contract length, and that's actually for me one of the things I haven't quite yet decided for this weekend how I'm going to play that out.
Yeah, I think VCarb's a decent ad, I think, this week. I already said I'm fairly high on Ricardo, especially at his price. And I think Sonoda's really coming to his own. So I think you're pretty good running them this week. I would run them over Alpine, over Haas. I would run them over Aston Martin. They're cheaper than Aston Martin. So I think if you're not running one of those, top tier constructors, that VCarb is a good one to go with.
Yeah, and I think if I'm putting Ricardo on my league, it's probably a rare instance for me where I'm doing it for a race or 2. He just hasn't not been up there that much, and I think Monaco might be an exception just based off what I said earlier historically. But I'm definitely not signing him for 3, 4, 5 races if it's on my team. Gage, 29 million in the bank, need a constructor and a driver. I think Racing Bulls and Ocon for a lineup of Perez, Piastri, Hulkenberg, K-Mag, Ocon with Red Bull. RB and Ocon with K-Mag, Hulkenberg, Piastri, and Sainz. Interesting.
What was the name on that? I want to look at that one.
Gage.
29.1 in the bank.
Racing Bulls and Ocon for a lineup. Yes, Sainz, Piastri, Hulkenberg, and K-Mag. Yeah, it seems very middle weighted. I don't know what there's.
Okay, so if our open spots are constructor and driver,
yeah, 29.
You could consider at this price. Okay, so who's our cheapest constructor these days? Probably Williams.
Yeah,
Williams at 7.
Yeah. And our cheapest driver would be Sargent at 4.5 or something.
4.4.
Yeah. Because the other way you could go with this would be to go max cheap on one side and then actually go for some quality on the other. So 29.1, if you're willing to stomach Logan Sargent, you can get yourself Mercedes as a constructor. And I'd say that there are probably a couple of spots ahead as far as being able to generate points compared to Racing Bulls. So that's an option. If you went Williams at 7 million, that leaves you only 21, 22 million, and you already have Piastri, who I think is the best choice at that price point. So just worth considering as well. And this is assuming that you're not going to drop anybody on an early release fee of some kind. So just another thought.
Yeah.
But if you want to split the difference, then Ocon and Racing Bulls is not a bad way to go either.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to run that lineup, maybe don't focus as much on points and try and look at the upside of the value that can be created there. So you might not win the league that week, but maybe you generate the most value in your league that week.
Not necessarily related to leagues or the app. Do we think Lando in the upcoming years could compete for the World Drivers' Championship? I absolutely think so. I think the last couple of races have been proof. I think it's just going to come down to if he stays at McLaren, can McLaren produce a World Championship car? As I think that is always the equation in this sport. I feel I've recently felt with Lando like I did with Verstappen back when it was the Hamilton area. I was kind of everybody wanted to see what happened if Verstappen was in similar car to Hamilton, who would be faster, and that's kind of what I've been wondering the last couple of races is if Lando was in an equivalent car, would he be beating Max? It's hard to say, but it's unquestionable that he has the skill. He's in a car that is not quite as performant, and he is coming up on Max. I think very, very quickly. So I definitely think if I was betting my own money, I'd bet on Lando for sure winning a world championship in the future. That'd be my bet.
Yeah, he's very much able to do that. If he were in that other Red Bull, this would be one heck of a season.
Oh yeah, and I think people like Lando. Lando's a likable guy, which I think is great for the sport. I think it's why everybody always wanted to see Ricardo win. He's just an enjoyable person to watch win. Let's see. Any other questions you guys see?
Yeah, 44 million for one driver and a constructor. They have Piastri, Stroll, Magnussen, and Max. So I would go, if you've got 44 million and you have Max, I would be looking at spending a chunk of that on the constructor side. I would not be. He's looking at Perez and Aston. I would say avoid on that.
Avoid Aston.
No, Checo's not the way to spend that money.
Yeah. There's better ways to spend that money than Checo.
I would like say McLaren or Mercedes, and this is 45 million we have to work with.
Yeah,
44 million.
44 million. So if we spend 21 on Mercedes, that leaves us 23 million, and 23 million. I'll get you George Russell. I've already forgotten who your other drivers are because my memory's not that great, but like Russell or Piastri would both be solid choices, and then Mercedes, and I think you're going to get a lot more points more consistently than you're going to get with Checo.
You can
and Russell's probably flattened out, I would guess. I'm just looking at a salary chart for the year. He started the year at just under 26 million, and he's kind of slowly, went down.
Yeah, Piastri has way more upside, but those are the choices. If I'm choosing, I'm definitely choosing Piastri.
Yeah, but you could also go McLaren Tsunoda. There's enough budget for that. If Tsunoda's not on lockout and you have Stroll and Magnussen, Tsunoda is a good choice there as well as Hülkenberg. Yeah, don't know who you're locked out of, but that's good money to play with.
What about Hamilton? I mean, this is Hamilton's salary for the year, so he's definitely on an upward trend. But I mean, how much more is it going to go?
I think I'd stick with. I think I'd sign a lower tier constructor or mid tier. I guess I'd go VCarb, and then you can sign Leclerc or Norris, Max, and then either Leclerc or Norris. That's a pretty stacked driver lineup right there. Mm-hmm. I think that's how I'd spend the money.
Jake Tanner, number one global is in our league. You thought his team wasn't built for the future.
I know what he's talking about. We said that lineups that were successful previously were not going to be successful for the next race, and there wasn't. There were a lot of shifts in the global leaderboard, but glad to see he retained the number one spot.
Yeah.
One whole week. Yeah, one whole week really deep into the future.
I think we already answered this, but if Kristen Lee are still on the phone, what happens if Max gets a race ban? I think William already alluded to it. Whoever fills his spot will earn points on his contract, is how the game works right now. Let's see.
The next one's fun. Anthrax, in your opinion, who are the top three potential one race moneymakers in the over 18 million drivers?
Alonso, for sure. Well, maybe not for sure, but anytime someone drops 2 million in a race, I'm kind of like, they have an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, first let's call it out. A one race contract is a gamble.
For sure.
That is a gambling situation. So, you're going to take the inherent risk with it. Right.
But for me, I'd say Alonso, maybe still Piastri. If he has a good race, we know he's in a car that's capable. again, Perez is a gamble. He's inconsistent, but he's in a car that's capable. So I just don't feel like, I don't know that I'd take. Yeah, I don't know.
If it's one race, give me Piastri. If we're talking about everyone over 18 million,
Yeah.
and our goal is to gain more value, give me Piastri. And then my next choice would actually be Sainz, currently ranked 5th, and he has a car that is capable of podium. At the very least, it's capable of podium, so more room to grow there. And he's somewhat more consistent among the choices.
What about under 18 million? One race contract.
I'm looking.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is putting me in a gambling mindset, but
Maybe
you have Gasly down 1 million, his teammates 12.7. There's definitely some potential there to make some money quickly.
Under 18 million, I would say if our goal is to make money, I'd say Magnussen and then Ricardo are probably your best choices.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I feel like the best combination of still could have upside, but also not huge risk.
We just have to make sure Magnussen keeps it clean and doesn't get himself into any kind of trouble.
Yeah,
that might help his value. You might gain a little bit if Magnussen misses a race. So there you go. I guess it's one race, but
well, the one way they can get real. Here's your risk scenario for Magnussen. I just thought about this. He gets his 2 penalty points in qualifying. I don't know if they would apply the ban that weekend or the next weekend, but if it applied that weekend, you could put somebody in who hasn't run a session, and that car would just not run that day.
Mm-hmm.
That's your risk with Magnussen. It's a pretty niche, extreme scenario, but
Kelsey Hohen.
Corners.
If Kelsey's still here, I think Kelsey's a big pick him in DFS player. Where can I find the algorithm for how points are calculated? You can find the algorithm for how points are calculated in the app. If you click on the tools icon in the top right of your league, like if you go to your My Team screen, the top right, there's a tools icon, and then you click on scoring. So that shows a breakdown of all the points that's in a league. If you're talking about in a daily fantasy contest, that's on the join screen. When you try to join a contest, there's little 4 buttons above that says scoring. And then for salaries, that's actually on a support article. So you go to support.gridrival.com, then go to leagues. And then there's actually 2 different articles that show the exact formula for how salaries are formulated on a week-to-week basis. So I don't know. Did I miss anything, guys? Is that proper directions, right?
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Yep. I've never ended a contract early. Jake Vossen, when do you guys justify taking the penalty to do that? So I think you're going to hear a wide variety of answers here. There's a lot of things to look at, right? How much is the penalty? It's a lot less punitive once you start getting into the back half of the, drivers under 10 million bucks. It's just to me, it's always a matter of gauging upside and then potential downside of whoever you're dropping. I probably should have dropped Albon early on, but I thought he was going to make a little bit of a comeback. So it really just depends on what other opportunities I think that you have on your team. If you can drop a contract and still have money and save somebody who you think is, underpriced. So I don't know. That's maybe like a little bit of a simpleton answer, but I don't try and overthink it that much. I'm also not the number 1 in our league, so I'd be interested in what Ryan has to say.
No, I would say it's twofold. It's one, kind of what Ross had said. If the driver is just, there's an issue, he looks horrible, you're sick of him, you're like, this is not turning around, I need to get rid of this, I need to cut bait, then that's one. And then I think we saw this situation last week, and it's the other side of the coin. Is there someone who looks like they're really going to make a jump that you need to find a way to get into your lineup? And, we'd seen what that McLaren did with the upgrades, and then we knew that Piastri only had half of them, but was going to get the full upgrade package that Lando had been running. And Piastri was at a great price point. So it's like, you might drop someone who doesn't even warrant dropping, but it's like, hey, I need Piastri on my team. I need to drop this person in order to accomplish that. So that's another thing. It's just potential out on the open market.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I will drop if there's a better way to deploy that money. So, for example, we saw Red Bull struggle in practice. I decided that a better use of that money would be to have McLaren as my constructor and make an upgraded driver. And as it turns out, Red Bull lost more value last week than I paid in that release fee, and McLaren gains value. So that actually ended up being a net positive, making that change. Um, so that's what it boils down to for me. Is there a better way to use this money? And if the answer is yes, then I'll eat the release fee.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I could do better than Max last week, and that was wrong, but that was a thought that I had.
Question from Mike. I don't really totally understand. It says, is there enough value in Bottas to hit our Albon and gamble on the mullet for 2 to 3 races? What do you mean? Does he mean drop? So what he's talking about?
I think he might be saying, can Bottas go from 5.3 to 9.1? Is that the question? That's a
tall order.
Yeah, it's a tall order.
If you get lucky.
The car's not good enough.
Well, he was doing pretty well, but his tires failed him because of the pit strategy. So there can be some upside in Bottas, but 5.3 to 9.1. That's a multi-race investment.
I don't know if I would bank on Bottas getting lucky in Monaco as my strategy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He does have a lot of experience, but I don't know how fast he's going to qualify. Bottas hasn't been having outstanding qualifying rounds. And so I think we all know Monaco, you're going to be pretty stuck with where you start, with the exception of, other folks DNF. And I think that's the only thing I'd be hoping for, is that any drivers above him don't finish and thus move him up higher in the ranking. But
the other possibility at Monaco is a safety car at just the right time, like in the middle of a cycle of pit stops, like we saw at Miami. Or even a red flag, because F1, you are allowed to change tires during a red flag. You get a pit stop absolutely free. And Monaco is slightly more like red flaggy, just because you can block the track more easily. So, yeah, that would be the one thing. Like, if we want to gamble, if we want to have randomness, that's where your randomness comes from. Like, when does the safety car happen? When does somebody crash?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would build a lineup around that, because it could happen pro or con to any driver, and good luck predicting that.
Yeah, for sure.
Fun fact, the fewest number of finishers in Formula One history was Monaco 1996. There were only 3 cars running at the end of that race.
Holy smokes.
The cars were also a lot less reliable back then. A lot of that was mechanical, but there were definitely crashes.
I feel like in recent years, again, my memory is slowly fading, I think. But when I used to watch Formula One as a child, which was early 2000s, I think is when I really got into it, Michael Schumacher era. I do recall Monaco being a really, really high attrition event, and it doesn't seem as much so in recent years. And I don't know if that's just me, but it was back then. It just seemed like 8 to 10 drivers at that race would not end up finishing. And I don't remember what it was for or why, but it does seem like there has been some, higher level of finish rate in the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe. Is that just me?
I would say that the driving standards are a lot higher than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like we have a grid right now that has 0 rookies. Whereas like back in those days, 20 years ago, you had like at least 4 random pay drivers who probably didn't belong in F1, but they brought the check and they're driving the cars. And we'll leave names out of it, but like you certainly know who those people were if you were watching back then. So I think that's part of it. And then the cars are also a lot more reliable than they were. Like back in the early 2000s, you could change your engine after qualifying. Now you have to make an engine. You have to make 3 engines last the entire year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was wild.
And the way these cars run on Monaco now, I mean, the overtaking topic has been beaten to death, but the drivers know it too. You're not going to have someone lunge anywhere at Monaco and cause any issues, because they all just know they can't pass.
Yeah, for sure. They are so huge. I mean, the Formula E race last year was incredible. There's so much overtaking, and just the size difference in the cars is like tremendous. All right, only a couple minutes left. Anyone have final questions? Type them in right now. Anthony Costaldo, hi. Basically 40 million, 39.6 available for 2 riders. Already have Leclerc, Piastri, Sonoda, and Haas. Should I go big for Max and Bottas, or go better split of drivers with Alonso and Hulk? That's kind of similar to the decision I have in front of me. I think that first choice is probably, a safer play that's not going to make you money. So a lot of this is going to come down to strategically where you're at in your league. And, if you're beginning to maybe focus more on points than you are money, not to say that that midfield option with Alonso and Hulk couldn't get you some, especially if, both of those perform really well at Monaco. But I don't know. This is what I see is like, I don't feel like Max and Bottas have a ton of upside. I think Alonso and Hulk have more upside. I wouldn't say they're, top of the list of upside, but
yeah, I think of the 3 options you presented, Alonso and Hulk is the one I like the least. I would say if you think Ricardo can turn around the consistency, I like Lando Ricardo as far as both points and value. But you also have a really great talent driver in Sonoda already.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go Max Bottas, you could do that. That said, Max, we see what his ceiling is. Like, he'll win the race and he'll get you the points that he's been generating. But anything goes wrong there, you're going to have a problem because Bottas is not going to bail you out. Like, Bottas is not somebody who's going to have a lucky week and, get you another like 10, 12 points that you weren't expecting. The Sauber just isn't good enough. And I think Zhou is better than him at this point.
Let's see. Any final questions? I don't feel like
I want to jump in for a second. Mike is literally daring me to run Lance. First of all, you don't need to threaten me with a good time. I'll run Lance anytime, anywhere. He's unfortunately on cooldown for me this week. But if you were here earlier, I did say I'm running him as talent driver in DFS. So hopefully that will suffice. And then F1 Mafia asked where my Logan Sargent hat is. The fan club takes Monaco off. We don't recognize this race. So it's not a strong track for him. I don't think it's going to go well. If it does, I'll be back with the Sargent hat. Don't worry. But for now, we're going to shy away from that just for a bit.
Gage asked, how's Kick Sauber stayed even for so long? So I just looked at their salaries, and this is not something you see much. Look at that. The answer is because they are consistent, I guess.
They're very consistently ninth best.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what you're getting when you sign these guys.
Yeah, the link I sent with the driver and constructor salaries shows the salary fantasy rank, and basically their salary is the 9th place fantasy rank salary. So as long as they keep coming in fantasy ranked 9th for constructors, they're going to stay flat. There will be no salary fluctuations.
All right, cool. Last question. Astro 44. I have 28.5. One more driver. Who should I go with? I mean, we don't know who else you have on your team, so
Lando,
Leclerc.
Lando's 29.3.
Lando's too expensive.
Yeah, darn.
If you don't have Leclerc, it's easily Leclerc. Yeah.
Then Leclerc in that case.
Yeah.
Somebody was wondering if I have aliens behind me. I don't know. Are these aliens? I think these are supposed to be like Native American thingies. I'm at an Airbnb in Las Vegas right now. Somebody was wondering, so we had to close that loop.
Cool. Well, we are going to end there. We appreciate everybody joining. We hope that you enjoy the Monaco Grand Prix. It's always a beautiful race and definitely a spectacle, and most definitely pageantry as well. So look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks' time ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix. And again, find us on Discord, subscribe on YouTube, and reminder, if you are a writer or if you're somebody that wants to help in moderation with our Discord community, to reach out to us. You can find us. If you don't find us on Discord, you can just email us support@gridrival.com, and we will get back to you soon. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye. All right.